Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Security Solutions TV. And today we are talking about cybersecurity with Maud Holvast, Country Business Leader for Australia and New Zealand at Alcatel-Lucent Enterprises. And joining Maud is Vincent Lomba, Chief Technology Officer and Security Lead at Alcatel-Lucent Enterprises. Maud, welcome to the program. Now, we've seen in the last couple of days here in Australia, there has been a lot of coverage in the media around organised crime groups and online hackers deploying artificial intelligence to try and leverage all sorts of gains through cybercrime and all the rest of it. Cybercrime is one of these things that just seems to keep rolling on no matter how much we roll out. So perhaps if I could get you to start by telling us a little bit about your organisation and what you do and the state of play, we can get this conversation rolling.
Thank you so much, John. As mentioned, my name is Maud Holvast. I'm the Country Business Leader with Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise in Australia. And essentially, we are a global information and communications technology company. We deliver what I would call mission critical and very robust, secure network infrastructure to government and enterprises in Australia. On top of that, we also deliver what we would call communications and collaboration solutions. So to put it in a little bit of a context, when you're looking at a mission critical hospital, or when you look at emergency services, energy and utilities, transportation, those sort of mission critical environments, they need very robust network infrastructure. So switching, Wi-Fi, but also the telephony on top, the mission critical messaging and collaboration tools. So that's what we deliver here in Australia and across the globe. And we do that through our partners, our certified partners here in Australia. Talking about, mission critical, when you work in an environment where, it's a hospital, obviously, patient data is of utmost importance, especially that it is protected wherever it is, but preferably, very protected in a private environment. Also, when you work with governments and citizen information, or even with hotels where they handle guest information, to protect all that data is super important. And obviously, our customers ask us about how we protect them, essentially. And we know that obviously a way into the networks and a way into the data is to try and hack into it. And nowadays, it's not just about people coming onto the networks, but it's also about all these different devices coming into the networks. And that brings lots of risks of hacks and all kinds of other problems. So, playing in those mission critical industries and providing that network infrastructure and communications infrastructure, obviously security needs to be in our DNA, in everything that we do, essentially. And so Vincent is actually here in Australia in the last couple of weeks to really talk to our customers and our business partners about how we ensure that security is part of everything that we do when we develop and deliver our products and services to our partners and customers. So everything you said there is very relevant. And I think Vincent can talk in more detail about exactly what we do when it comes to protecting our customers and partners here in Australia.
Well, Vincent, welcome to Australia, and thank you for coming all the way out here to join us. I suppose from your point of view, being the Chief Technology Lead and Security Lead for an organisation that provides mission-critical communications to, as we've discussed, government services, hospitals, critical infrastructure, and all sorts of people, security has to be at the forefront of your mind at all times. So where does security fit into your company's operations? And tell us a little bit about what's taking your attention at the moment.
Security now has been introduced in nearly any place in the organization. Obviously, we started to look after it by naturally the IT department because they used to be the one who has the responsibility to put in place the predefined means, the equipments, the security firewalls, etc., etc. So it used to be, I would say, a technical approach that were belonging to the IT department. What has changed in the last couple of years, is the fact that now more and more we need to introduce the security nearly everywhere. As a concrete example, the recent major attack has compromised the supply chain, and supply chain is all about the trust or the non-trustability of the suppliers you may have. So it may be one of the open door to the I would say the bad actors here. And this is where we have, for example, here in our case, put in place additional controls, additional screenings, additional investigation to ensure that all the suppliers or the technology provider that we are collaborating with have the same capability in terms of cybersecurity, the same knowledge, and to make it even more powerful, the same culture about the cybersecurity, protecting the assets, protecting the data, protecting the processes is not something that we invent, is something that we need to be in the head of all the players we are interacting with. So it's no longer just a question for purely engineers. It has to be handled, it has to be understood, it has to be accompanied by nearly everyone for each and every piece of work that people are doing in the company. And sometimes, like what I mentioned in the procurement department, in unattended department. This is not where we thought initially it was important. It has become important, and this is exactly what the recent attack has shown. It was something to look after.
You mentioned something that I think is becoming a really important and recurring theme in this space about protecting supply chain, because we are seeing over and over and over again, from the Target attack that happened on the Target retail chain some years ago through to other vendors like Optus and Medibank and some of the other bigger players in the last few years. It's very, very rarely, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very, very rarely the main parent organization that tends to be the source of the issue. It's a second or third or even fourth tier vendor. It might be your heating and ventilation control maintenance people, or the people who provide the printing ink for your presses, or whatever it may be. They seem to be the vector of entry that's bringing everyone unstuck. Is this the case? And if so, what do we need to be doing from a point of view of an organizational structure to rectify this?
You're absolutely right. As I said, we initially thought it was a pure technical thing to be handled by the IT department, which is no longer the case. And now it is something that is coming by the unattended equipment. As an example, we have seen a recent major attack that were brought by simply the misuse or the misconfiguration of surveillance camera. The surveillance camera are now connected onto the network. So it was an entry door to bad actors to penetrate the network from the outside. Of course, it was cheap cameras, not well managed, etc., etc. So in order to prevent that, there is many things to put in place. The first, as I said, is to ensure that everything that we are dealing with, every organization that we are dealing with, are trustable. To do that, we have, fortunately for us, we can rely on some well-known standards, and the one I have in mind here is the ISO 27001. That is, I would say, one of the most recognized standards any organization can try to be certified on. And when it is the case, there is a trust that comes along with it, because it means that this organization do apply control, do have some specific measures, do follow the best practices that are in place to ensure that the security around the data and the processes are well managed, are understood, and much more importantly, supported by the head, by the management of those organizations. So again, security is spread all across the organization. I mentioned the case for the procurement. but it can also be the case for the R&D. So now, for example, when we are developing a product, and this is our case, we are product manufacturers, developers, and we are delivering solutions. We no longer develop a product without assessing the security. And when I say that, it is not to say we block the innovation. No, we control the innovation with having the security in our hand at each and every step in that innovation approach. As an example, I will want to introduce a new technology. This new technology is something my customers are requesting from me, expected from me. That's right, I will develop everything. But before developing, the first thing that I will do is assessing the associated risk I am putting in my product, I am adding in my product. In security, we call that the attack surface. So adding something new is an increase of the attack surface. So a potential increase of new threats. And I have to put countermeasures before issuing my technologies and made it available to my customer. Doing that way, as again, a manufacturer, we ensure that, I will not say we are 100% that everything is under control in terms of security. That is a myth, but at least we have put in place everything that we have under our control that follows the best practices that the security agencies are promoting and are disclosing. We have fortunately very talented organization that provide us with the good insight. What do we recommend you to do to apply? As an example, the password management. As another example, what regulation should I follow to protect my personal data, my personal health information, etc., etc.
I mean, that's great for an organization like you because you have the resources to be able to develop these things in the manner that you do and ensure that everything's protected and trusted and works and so on. But in a lot of your customers, they're going to be looking at bringing in new technologies from a wide array of sources all the time. And we're seeing this more and more with the convergence of physical and cyber security, where we're bringing in new cameras and new access point readers and new card readers and all the rest of it. And not everyone necessarily always has the time, the money, or the resources to sandbox new systems for a month or 3 months before they let them wild into the ecosystem of the company's IT infrastructure. So from your point of view, what do organizations need to be doing when they're ingesting new devices, new information, new personal data into their system? What does that mean, that bringing in of new content, and how do they protect against that to ensure that they're running at best practice?
One of the points, I will come back on this one because to me it is the key, one of the key of the success when some specific customers do not have what you mentioned, the knowledge or the good practices, is to rely on the standards. To ask simply the question, are you certified for that kind of standard? Do you follow the rules? Are you in contact with your security agency, your local security agency? Such kind of very simple question that do not require a specific expertise, just need to know that this certification exists, this security agency exists. And if your supplier does bring you with evidence, yes, of course, I'm certified. I have the certification. I've been audited 1 month ago. I'm in regular contact with authorities with regard to the cybersecurity. I would say it brings the trustability of the supplier. It is a very simple question. Again, no need to go deeper into the technical details that nearly nobody understands clearly, and that I have to admit that are not clear at all. But yes, simple things like that, certification on one side, regular contact with well-known organization, that will be, I would say, the most efficient practice to put in place. Easy again, and in most of the case, like here in Australia, you do have the ACSC, so your local authorities that manages that issue regular informations or set of best practices. Just having a quick reading on that. Okay, I belong to that specific vertical segment. What are my checkpoints? Quite easy and straightforward to use, and as simple as just ticking the box. Okay, I've controlled that, and you have, if you follow that way, done, I would say, more than 99% of the job the good way.
So to come back to one of the points that you made earlier, you mentioned one of the major ISO standards. Obviously, whenever we're looking at putting any sort of security overlay in place, there's enough information out there these days, I'm assuming, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Someone has written a lot of this for us in various different forms. What are the main, especially when it comes to things like critical infrastructure and mission critical systems, what are, in your view, the main ISO certifications and other certifications that organizations really should be paying attention to?
The well-known and I would say the most common one is the ISO 27001 that is not specific to vertical markets. Now, when there is some specific vertical markets, there is additional standards that could apply. And here, it's again a matter of looking after the most relevant one. I can mention, for example, some new standard that has been issued for all manufacturing that are very specific, or companies that are using what we call operation technologies, so operating some devices that were not naturally protected, unlike the IT devices nowadays. And for that, again, there is some specific new editions of standards that have to be followed and that are adapted to the vertical market. Another example is within the healthcare environment, and I will go a little bit outside of Australia there. In Europe, there is a dedicated standard that has been issued, named HDS, that put a lot of constraints on the shoulders of all the healthcare operator that needs to follow a given set of rules, and that has become mandatory by law. And what we see as a trend is that more and more this kind of approach become relevant, not only because it is adapted to the particular vertical segment, but also because it is, I would say, for the benefit of the user of these specific entities. We all know that security is associated with cost. What we know as well is that if you don't protect, the cost of the risk that you are taking is much more expensive. So simply follow that kind of guidances, should it be by certification or in some cases by law, is a lot. As another example, here in Australia, you have specific regulation about the use of locally based solutions in order to protect the data, in order to protect the processes, to not rely on an external country with different regulations, with different capabilities to export the data, to access to the data. So you have your set of regulation. Simply follow that kind of regulation is very straightforward and is for the benefit of all the entities that are operated here in Australia.
Anyone listening to this will be familiar with the fact that security is a very, very, very fluid environment. It changes rapidly from a day-to-day perspective. It's evolving at a huge rate of knots at the moment. In fact, in the last 4 years, we have had things like COVID-19, which forced everyone into remote work, which changed things dramatically. Then we had the war in Ukraine, which put financial restrictions on Russia, which forced a lot of the organized cybercrime gangs to go seeking other financial resources through all sorts of nefarious means. We now have the growth and development of artificial intelligence, which is exploding and growing at a rapid rate. What are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing in the cybersecurity space at the moment? And I suppose, what are some of the things that people need to be doing as far as countermeasures are concerned to deal with some of these emerging trends?
As you mentioned, the changes in habits about working, so not working just the office anymore, but having different locations, remote working, not only the home, but remote working, has simply expanded the attack surface. So working at home is a new attack surface possibly. So I would say the thing to bear in mind is that every situation has to be considered as non-trustable by default. So having the consciousness of being in an unsecure environment. So I'm working at home, I need to be as secure as possible. So I need to act as if I were and behave as if I were at the office, for example, with, of course, the help of my IT department. So new habits, new locations, so new security rules for the IT department, but also to a certain extent, new things that the simple worker has to apply by contract with the organization. So increase in the attack surface because change in the habits, definitely. Something also to take into consideration is that now the attack can come from anywhere. Due to the war in Ukraine, we have seen a lot of new bad actors coming from different locations. No need to name them here, but it's not no more coming from one specific location. And by the way, from a pure, I would say, technical point of view, with the usage of VPN and so on, we cannot just say we block all the attacks that are coming from Russia or that are coming from anywhere else, whatever it is. It has to be protected as a whole. So new trend is considering that the cyber world has become unsafe by default, and to consider that anytime I'm connecting a PC via a cable or to a Wi-Fi access point, I am by default in an unsecure environment. As an example, in our product line, we have defined a specific control of the access to the network, thanks to what device is connected onto, and to be able to segregate and give different privileges according to the device, according to the trustability of the device, etc., etc. So
Sure.
That's one of the major change that we have seen. What we could mention as well is the number of bad actors that have literally exploded. You mentioned that back 4 years ago, it was definitely not the same situation. I can give a simple example there. The vulnerability, which is something that affects potentially a given number of software, and we used to have a very big one 1.5 years ago from now, by the name of Log4j. 2.5 years ago, it took about a month between the disclosure of the vulnerability and the actual exploit that were reported. Now it is in less than 24 hours. So what has completely changed is the reaction time that we need to put in place to prevent such a vulnerability to be actually exploited, so to not be exposed to the threats. So change is increase of the attack surface and the reaction times that we need to have in order to control and to protect all the infrastructure with regards to the threats.
Now, last but not least, I'll just close with this question. It seems that in all of these attacks, more often than not, the greatest vulnerability is the human. It's people that tend to let the chain down. What are some of the more common mistakes that you're finding people making? Because there's a lot of myths and misconceptions around what is secure and what is not. In fact, I heard the other day, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, something along the lines of with brute force software these days and the power of computers, it takes roughly 30 seconds to crack a 4-digit PIN code. It takes marginally longer than that to crack a 6 or 8-digit PIN code. And that goes for passwords as well. You were talking a little bit about password hygiene earlier in the interview. If you had to give people watching this, 2 or 3 basic things to take away from this and say, this is what you need to be aware of, what would it be?
Be aware of the fact that every information by default is unprotected, and using password or simple password, as you mentioned, is not enough today. And this is why, for example, we have introduced the need for multi-factor authentication. So one of the good habits is to not rely on, I would say, simple usage of password that we used to have. You mentioned the fact that the user were, these, by the way, still the weakest point. I don't like to point out just the users, but more the people that are here to educate the users. If the organization do not have anyone to explain to the user, to explain to the people that are not engineers what to do to be protected, what to avoid to be still safe from a cybersecurity standpoint, we cannot blame the users. The users are not engineers. They are not cryptographic experts, etc. So this is the duty of the enterprise or the organization to train in the most acceptable way those kind of users. Blaming people, to me, is the worst way. Training, educating on a regular basis, keeping them up to date with concrete example, give simple exercise to practice, train them to become a simple hacker, because today it is very easy, unfortunately. So it is a good way or good habits to move ahead. And again, to get the people well involved and well supported to adopt those kind of best practices.
Yeah, but it would also seem that an important part of that puzzle is to help people understand the consequences of not doing things properly, because good security to me is always a balance between security and convenience. And as human beings, we will always opt for the most convenient option over the most secure option unless we understand the consequences of those actions.
Absolutely. And when you speak about convenience, it's all about the acceptance. And when you have something that is accepted because not a big constraint with some password that nobody can remind, and we are all humans and we know that we have limited capabilities to remind a complex password with a multiple kind of digits. Even me, even if I'm not supposed to say that, but I need to explain to people that they need to put complex password. On the other hand, I can understand the fact that we need to provide them with much more simpler way of accessing to controlled information or controlled processes in a very much convenient manner. What the PCs are now providing is footprint recognition to log onto the PC. That is a very easy way to access to the PC. That is very convenient as well, not 12-digit password complex to enter. So definitely, again, it's all about the acceptance, not putting too much constraints on the shoulder of simple users, being accepted. And as you mentioned, and I fully agree with that, let the people know the consequences of not following the good practices.
Fantastic. And Maud, just in closing, if people want to know more about Alcatel-Lucent Enterprises, where do they go and what can they look up?
Oh, absolutely. If people want to connect and learn more about our infrastructure solutions and how we protect their businesses and their customers, they can reach out to me. I'll be very happy to take any queries and follow up with it myself or with people of my team or our partners.
Well, Maud, Vincent, thank you very much for taking the time to chat to us today. It's been extremely informative, and hopefully the rest of your visit, Vincent, isn't quite so warm and you get to enjoy Australia.
Many thanks. And yeah, I will enjoy Australia, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.